Welcome to Lead Well, Live Whole. I'm your host, Michael Sirmon. Every episode, we'll spend a few minutes exploring the challenges, questions, and realities of everyday life, because success means little if you lose yourself in the process. So take a breath, settle in, and let's spend a few minutes exploring life together. Welcome back to the Lead Well, Live Whole podcast. I'm Michael Sirmon, and every week we explore practical ideas to help you think clearly, lead confidently, and live whole. Today I want to talk about something we all experience but barely recognize. Not stress, not burnout, not even change itself. I want to talk about what change steals from us. It steals our rhythms. And sometimes what we're feeling isn't the weight of a new season, it's the absence of familiar rhythms that quietly held us together. There's a huge difference between schedules and rhythm, and it took me a long time to figure that out, right? And I think there's an important distinction that we don't often make. A schedule, that's what fills your calendar. But a rhythm, that's what steadies your soul. Schedules tell us where we want to be, what we want to do, who we want to be with, but rhythms tell us who we're becoming. Right? Most of us don't think much about them because they become so normal. We wake up at the same time. We drive the same route. We know exactly where our coffee cup is. We sit in the same chair. We know what Monday feels like, right? And we know what Friday feels like. They're ordinary. They're familiar. They're almost invisible. But you know what? They're also stabilizing. Our brains are designed to conserve energy. So when something becomes familiar, it requires very little mental effort. So that's why rhythms become so comforting, right? Not because they're excitable, but because they're predictable. But what happens when everything changes, right? You're going along fine. Everything's good. You have your rhythms. You have your patterns. It's comfortable. It's safe. And then one day life changes. You accept a promotion. You retire. You start a new job. Maybe you move, right? Or your children leave home, or you have children, right? You launch a business. You lose someone you love. And sometimes the changes are painful, but sometimes they're also wonderful. Like right now, our grandchildren are here visiting. And it is so disruptive to our rhythm that yesterday, when the first day that they were all here and all the energy and all of that, and it's 100 plus degrees outside, so they're trapped in the house, and I'm trying to get some work done, and it was just like fingernails on a chalkboard because they were interrupting my rhythm. And for quite a while, I was thinking that it was because they were just loud and I was trying to record and all this stuff, but it wasn't. It really was about the rhythm. It was about what I would normally do without thinking about. It was simple. It was easy. I would come into my office, which is also my recording studio, and I would pull out the microphone and I would start recording. But now suddenly I'm having to pay attention to the thumps and the bumps and the screams and the cries where they're playing upstairs, and they're playing like, all kids, right, from age 6 to 13, and they've got a lot of energy. And it's good because they weren't destructive and they weren't doing anything wrong. But it was twisting me out of shape because it interrupted my rhythm. I know what I do when I record. I know when I sit down, how I do it, how I record, how I edit, how I do all of this stuff. And now I have this extra thing added to me, right? It's wonderful that they're here. I love that they're here. We love spending time with them. But I didn't think about the impact on my rhythm. I could have scheduled a different time to do the recording. I could have done some different things to help me manage what that impact would be, but I didn't think about it, right? Because your brain doesn't evaluate whether the change is good or bad, right? It doesn't evaluate whether stress is good or bad. All it recognizes is that something familiar has changed, and it's changed suddenly, right? Suddenly, we don't know where anything is, right? Grandkids coming in here, my youngest one, right? He likes to come in here and he'll walk in. He's like, oh, you have so many cool things here. And he'll want to start exploring and understanding what the cool things are, right? hoping obviously that I'll give them to him and he can take them home. But he began to move stuff around. And it's funny because the guys in my plants, they used to have fun because I'm not OCD, not full blown, but I like comfort. I like rhythm. I like things being in place. I like things being lined up properly. And they like to mess with the chairs in the conference room. They like to walk into my office when I was out of it, just and shift some stuff on my desk to see how long it would take me to put it back in place. And I wouldn't pay attention to it. I would just reach over and automatically change it because that's where it goes. It doesn't go here, it goes there, right? So your brain, all it knows is something has changed. It doesn't know if it's good or bad. It knows everything familiar has changed, right? So, it now has to reestablish where everything is. You launch into something new, you don't know the people, you don't know the unwritten rules, right? You don't know what tomorrow feels like. And without realizing it, your brain starts working overtime, right? Because every small decision suddenly requires conscious thought, and that's exhausting. There's a great book that I read. I'm trying to remember the title of it. It's like Fast Thinking. Yes, Fast Thinking, Slow Thinking, and it talks about the routine things your body puts into like an automatic mode. Right? I'll call it a B level thinking, so that whenever it's an automatic system. So when this happens, you automatically do this. Your brain doesn't have to process it. And then when new things come in, right, then it has to slow down and process that new thing until you build up that muscle memory in your brain, and then it becomes something familiar and it gets shifted over to the automatic, right? But the small conscious decision thought processes are exhausting, right? And we talk about stress and we talk about exhaustion with work. It's always talking about work, but it's not always in your work, right? I've seen it countless times in leadership. I've seen it in homes. I've seen it in churches, right? But in a manufacturing environment, someone takes over a new facility. It may be the same industry. It may be the same equipment. It may even be the same company. But yet, after a few weeks, suddenly it's like, man, why am I so tired? Right? And it's not because the work is harder, it's because the rhythms disappeared. There's a different commute, there's a different parking space, there's a different office, there's different personalities, right? There's different expectations, there's different politics, and there's hundreds of tiny adjustments that have to be made. And they have to be consciously made. Each one demands attention, right? And none of them are significant by themselves, but together they're draining. And we talk about stress and how detrimental it is, but good stress and bad stress, again, your body doesn't know what the difference is, right? Because the rhythms of our lives shape our identity, right? And that's a layer we don't often talk about. Rhythms aren't just habits, right? They're our identity. Maybe we've always been the first one in the office. Maybe every Tuesday night was dinner with friends, right? Maybe your spouse always met you for breakfast. Maybe your evening walk became your place to think. And those moments become woven into who we are. So when life interrupts them, we feel disoriented. And we start asking ourselves, why do I feel off, right? Something just doesn't feel right. But you know what? Maybe nothing's wrong with you. Maybe you're grieving rhythms you didn't even realize mattered. No one sends flowers because you lost your morning commute. And no one notices when your favorite lunch routine disappears. Sorry, my grandson's on the back side of the computer trying to get my attention. Right. But you know what? No one notices when your favorite lunch routine disappears. And no one recognizes the quiet grief of cleaning out an office that you've occupied for 10 years. But those losses are real and they deserve to be acknowledged. Right. But we often approach it wrong. Right. And this is what I see happen far too often. Life changes and we abandon every healthy rhythm that we have. We stop exercising. We stop reading. We stop taking walks. We stop date nights. We stop praying. We stop journaling. We stop sleeping consistently. We remove every anchor. And at the exact moment we need anchors the most, we remove them. And then we wonder why we feel adrift. I talk to a lot of people that are transitioning from a full-time role into a part-time role or into an entrepreneurial situation. And I tell every one of them the same. And I'm good at telling other people, and I struggle with myself, right? I tell them, establish your routines, establish a rhythm now, because you're going to need it. You're used to your rhythm. You're used to your routines. You're used to your patterns. They give you a sense of purpose. They give you a sense of identity. Work those out. Establish them now before you step into that role, because you're going to need that consistency. You're going to need the stability in the transition, right? So maybe when you're rebuilding your rhythms, maybe the answer isn't trying to recreate your old life. Maybe it's intentionally creating a new familiar rhythm inside your new one, right? Maybe, protect your morning coffee. Oh, definitely protect your morning coffee. Take an evening walk. Keep Friday pizza night, right? Call your friend every Thursday or every Tuesday or whenever it is, right? Don't isolate yourself. Don't think that it's just you. Now, I'm a solopreneur, so it's hard for me to remember to connect, to reach out, to try to, stay in contact with someone outside the little bubble that I work in, that I live in, right? Where it's just me and Tammy, right? So call someone, read before you go to bed, pray before you open your emails, right? Because small rhythms create stability. In fact, you would be surprised at the stability and the peace that they will create, right? Because they quietly tell your nervous system that not everything has changed. And sometimes that's what your mind needs to hear. But I think there's an important leadership lesson, right? Either for whether it's at work or at home, that great leaders, they don't just help people navigate change. They help people establish new rhythms. There's consistent communication. There is predictable one-on-ones. There's clear expectations. There's regular recognition. There's a reliable meeting cadence, right? So, because when everything feels certain, predictability then becomes leadership. People don't always need to have every answer, but sometimes they just need to know what tomorrow is going to feel like. Right? We used to call it change management, right? Where you would speak it and speak it and speak it and speak it and speak it, and you would say it over and over and over again as a natural part of your conversation, and then people would start repeating it back. Their minds started recognizing that as the new normal, and then they could accept it, and it was part of who they were, part of their conversation, part of their identity, part of their ID, right? So that it wasn't such a dangerous feeling stepping into the new, stepping into the change, right? So if you've been feeling unusually tired, been feeling emotionally unsettled, and I'm talking to myself here, folks, or overwhelmed by a season that should actually be exciting, ask yourself a different question. Instead of asking what's wrong with me, ask what rhythms have changed, right? Because you may discover that you're not failing. You're simply adjusting to life without the familiar patterns that once carried more of the load than you realized. The encouraging news is this, right? Rhythms can be rebuilt, not overnight, not perfectly, but intentionally. And often, one small rhythm becomes the foundation for everything else. Because sometimes leading well begins with something much simpler than solving every problem. Sometimes it begins by reclaiming the rhythms that help us live whole. So thank you for spending these few minutes with me today. If this episode encouraged you, I would like you to like, follow, or subscribe wherever you're listening. And if someone came to mind while you were listening, share this episode with them. You never know how much a simple conversation can help someone else find clarity in the middle of change. I'd also be grateful if you'd leave a review. It helps more leaders discover the Lead Well, Live Whole community. And if you'd like more leadership resources, articles, coaching, or information about bringing Lead Well, Live Whole to your organization, visit michaelsirmon.com. Remember this, the greatest leader you'll ever lead is the person you become. So until next time, lead well, live whole. If today's conversation raised a question you've been wrestling with, I'd love to help. I offer one-on-one coaching for individuals navigating pressure, transition, and important decisions. You can learn more at michaelsirmon.com.